Okay, let's get some analysis on what's happening in the Middle East. We're joined now by Kian Tajbakhsh, an international relations professor at New York University and a fellow at Columbia University's Committee on Global Thought. And he was held as a prisoner in Iran for his political activism. Kian, we appreciate you being with us. Do you have any sense, is there any way of telling how firmly the Iranian regime is currently in control of the country?
Thank you for inviting me. I think that we should not underestimate the ability of the current Iranian regime to maintain a robust amount of control. They are reassembling their leadership. They have just announced the new supreme leader, apparently, an hour ago. And I think that we should not underestimate the ability of the IRGC to maintain both internal control and also control of their armed forces.
And so I don't have to tell you, Iranians saw just a few months ago how brutally the leaders respond even to protests. And so how likely is it that people in Iran will take up, Trump's invitation to try to seize control of the country?
As someone who suffered in Iranian prisons for political activism, I would love to see the ability of the Iranian people to rise up in their millions and overthrow this regime. But I'm afraid that the brutality you just mentioned makes the fear factor amongst the population extremely high. And so I think the balance of power currently between the anger that at least 50% of the population have against this regime, balanced against the fear, is currently working against the ability of the people to get into the streets. So I think the regime is currently in control until they're even more degraded. We'll have to see how that goes over the next few weeks.
And do you think that degradation, the degrading of the leadership, can happen through airstrikes? Or let me put this to you more directly. What do you think needs to happen for there to be regime change in Iran?
Well, I think the first thing that needs to happen is that the regime needs to be weakened at every single level. And given the reports that we've been hearing, that can be done through airstrikes. That is to say, decapitation of the leadership, the destruction of the repressive apparatus. We've been hearing that the IRGC centers, headquarters, Ministry of Intelligence, and other kinds of Basij and paramilitary centers have been hit. So the more the regime is weakened, the more the possibility of some future opening for the people does emerge. But it's far from guaranteed that it will be enough for people to overcome the fear factor and go into the streets.
We have a lot of people in Canada with family ties to Iran, and we've heard a lot of them in the media, including on this show. And there's so much, there has been like almost elation at the news that the supreme leader was killed in the initial strikes. How about you? Are you optimistic? Do you despair for what's currently happening inside Iran? How do you feel?
Well, obviously, I despair for all the loss of life that this regime is responsible for, especially the brutal crackdown, which is really historically unprecedented. I mean, we're talking about 2,000 people in a couple of days. So I despair for that. On the other hand, as someone who has for many decades been working for a more open and free and democratic Iran, I cannot avoid the conclusion that this day was inevitable. That is to say, it is the Iranian regime that declared war on the United States and Israel. They have been itching for this fight. When I was in prison, the IRGC officer told me, when I told him, look, you're picking a fight with a big enemy, he said, our body is itching for a fight. That means that they were so fanatical and so ideologically committed that they were willing to go down with the ship. And we can see that that's pretty much what the IRGC, the core of the regime, is doing. And so I think they're really in for, they're digging in and they're willing to go down with the ship.
We're running short of time, but I do want to ask you one final quick question. You know that there is a debate going on in many places, including Canada, about whether the United States flouted international law and whether it should have followed international law, no matter how brutal this regime is. What's your view on that?
Well, my view is that international law is only useful if all sides abide by it. Iran, for the last 2 decades, has used international law. The Iranian regime has used international law to cheat on its commitments in the nuclear file, to game the system in supporting terrorist proxies throughout the region. And so I think that there comes a point when international law, as they say, international law is not a suicide pact. Israel simply cannot wait for Iran to, under the cover of international law, end up with a nuclear weapon in which they are dedicated to destroying a whole nation. And so I think that the question of international law is something that the Iranian regime flouted many times, and they seem to be paying the cost for it.
Kian Tajbakhsh, International Relations Professor at New York University and a fellow at Columbia University's Committee on Global Thought. Thank you so much for speaking with us.
Thank you.